Every story begins with a spark. A single page, a single voice, a single chapter. Welcome to Chapter 1, where our authors take you on the journey in their own words. Settle in, listen closely. This is where the adventure begins.
And this one is from His Last Name, which is a spin-off from the Son of No Man series. It is a romance, basically written because I had to wrap up the last of the interactions between two characters. So His Last Name, a fantasy adventure romance, starts now. Chapter 1. Kitable crossed off the charcoal writing, discouraged. The code line broke the flow of the spell and would sour it beyond use. He would have to start again. He tossed the useless vellum onto a stack that had been formed on the table before him, burying the various broken or half-finished enchanted trinkets. Somewhere near the other edge of the table, a cup of tea was getting cold. Shimmer was reading yet another ancient book in the other room, seeking a reference to focuses. It seemed a waste. Her energy would be better put towards honing her skills and reducing the words of a spell, as he was doing. Although much of their magic was arranged in pre-casted hovering spells, efficiently casting a spell from scratch was invaluable under duress. Shortening one word out of a dozen could save time and possibly their lives. He had put distance between them deliberately. Something about Shimmer seemed off this morning, and he did not want her apparent distraction throwing off his work. She was still determined to find the secret behind the focus, claiming it could be a vital tool in defensive situations. But her efforts led to constant dead ends, and he was too discouraged to keep at it. All he knew about a focus was that it was not something made of wizard magic. That made it uninteresting. There was a knock on his door, and, preoccupied, Kitable did not even consider his response. "Go away," he snapped. "Tough," the deep voice replied on the other side of the door. "You have to open the door for me, Kit." Had he failed to recognize the voice, Kitable would have known the speaker by the nickname. Only one man alive called him Kit. Leaving his work, Kitable opened the door to admit King Tohmas. "Unexpected visit, my king," he said. He saw Prime Protector Karsh in the hallway, but gave the tough Ryden a look that prompted him to stay outside. Kitable closed the door quickly. Karsh hated magic anyway. He'd be glad for the excuse to stay in the hallway. "Being unexpected," the king replied, "is why my enemies hate me." Although the King of Esbar visited about every moon cycle, he always paused within the entrance to Kitable's chambers, claiming to be checking if anything had changed. The chambers, although spacious, were sparsely decorated and jumbled. Bookcases filled with either magical trinkets or books lined all walls but one, and their contents varied depending on the research whims of Kitable and Shimmer's recent projects. The smooth wizard stone of the ceiling was marred by various stains, splatters, and two curious green lines that had appeared after a confrontation with an old curse. They'd faded to a blue lately. The one bare wall bore windows that looked over an elaborate garden in late summer. He'd adjusted the enchantment last quarter cycle to better bring in the light during the afternoon. The chambers were underground, in truth, but it would be hard to tell. Finishing his assessment, the king found a seat at the cluttered table. King Tohmas had instigated the custom of offering drinks during meetings, making it expected for Kitable to immediately offer his patron the only beverage he had available, the tea Shimmer had made that morning. He quickly dug out a teacup and topped it off from the ever-warm teapot. The king accepted it as smoothly as any drink, although the small cup looked like a toy in his large, rough hands. Shimmer stuck her head into the room to investigate. She should have been able to guess the identity of their visitor. King Tohmas was the only person Kitable could be convinced to let in. Her face brightened to see their patron sitting his bulk on a rickety chair. She had been pestering him to get the seat fixed, or at least reinforce it magically, for almost a year. Her grin now suggested she wondered if it would collapse under the king and prove her right. But then Shimmer was always smiling. Kitable could scarcely remember half a dozen moments lacking her grin since he had met her 3 years ago. Since becoming his apprentice, Shimmer had shed her colorful clothing and jewelry. Now she was typically found in plain ankle-length dresses and shawls, her crimson hair tucked away under cowls and wimples. She looked nothing like the performer and apothecary who had traveled Espar, except for her persistent apothecary bag. He spotted it over her shoulder even now. "So," the king said, "how are you and Shimmer getting along?" Every moon cycle, Kitable would be accosted to provide an update for his patron. It had never been so direct before, but, assuming the king's purpose was the same, Kitable asked Shimmer to go clean the world's mobile. "It's not dirty," she replied. "You are assuming I want you to clean it because it is dirty." Her smile grew, warning him he would not like her next sentence. "No, I'm pointing out I know you are not asking me to clean it because it's dirty." She skipped back into the side room, allowing Kitable to sit across from his patron in a temporary peace. "You two doing all right?" the king asked. "She is disobedient, headstrong, and useless," Kitable said. After letting the words settle, he added, "She's also eavesdropping." "Oi!" Shimmer's voice came from the side room. "Eavesdropping is unbecoming of a lady," he shouted. "Whoever said I was a lady?" she shouted back. Instead of getting into yet another debate, Kitable said a single word. One of the many precasted spells hovering around him answered by sealing the side room with a wind barrier. "That'll hold her for a short while," Kitable explained. "Not long." He'd spent the last 2 years cultivating her talent in magic. He could not be upset by her adeptness. "So how is she really doing?" the king asked. With his apprentice no doubt already working through the spell's defenses, Kitable did not have time to be ambiguous. "She is brilliant," he admitted. "She has the most critical, beautiful way of thinking. These days our work has us both making discoveries. I'm not sure there's anything else I can teach her." The admission caught him by surprise. If he had nothing left to teach her, Shimmer's apprenticeship was ending. He did not like that thought. "Are you two available?" His response was as reflexive as his earlier dismissal of the knock. "I hate missions." The king chuckled into his cup. "No, you like missions. They give you something to work on. You hate missions that make you leave the room." With a mischievous smile, he added, "You are not going to like this one." "So where are we going?" "Lure." Kitable's stomach sank. He did not like traveling anywhere in Espar, but the province of Lure in the west was his least favorite destination. In the last 20 years since he had left it, he had visited exactly once, and still thought that one time too many. Proving further that he was losing the shrewdness they had come to love, the king did not seem to notice Kitable's discomfort. "Digging?" Kitable wondered. If he was going to clean out more collapsed tunnels, he would be annoyed, but not concerned. He could finish that kind of job quickly and be out before anyone thought too hard about it. "More complicated," the king said. "The problem was in Stone Peak for a while. It appears to have moved." "What exactly is the problem?" The king shrugged his massive shoulders. "I do not know." "So why does it involve me?" "Because it is probably magic." "Probably?" "Probably is why I appreciate you, Kitable. One way or another, you will know." Unable to argue that point, the Master Wizard asked, "If it is no longer in Stone Peak, where is it?" Putting down the teacup gently, the king leaned forward. "A small village east of Stone Peak called Woodcutter's Retreat. I know it." Kitable's unease was too obvious this time for the king to miss. "You've lived in Galanth for your entire life except for our move here to Trulin's border, to my knowledge. You going to explain how you know such an insignificant corner of Lure?" Kitable shook his head. There was no point. "Right." The king shrugged. "They've been getting some odd activities, like thefts with no trace, strange lights, noises. No one can figure it out, so Kingsman Loratat came to me. You up for it?" He wished he could say no, but Kitable had never been able to refuse Tohmas, and problems in Woodcutter's Retreat already made him nervous. He'd investigate regardless. It would be easier if he did so officially. "I will check into it and travel up if necessary. Is that satisfactory?" The king grinned and finished his tea in a single swallow, like shooting spirits. "I never expect less of you." "You should, you know," he reminded the king, but Tohmas did not seem to hear him. Shimmer broke down the wind barrier in time to hear the king's farewell. She looked as though she had something to say, but Kitable's frown discouraged her. Instead, she went back to disassembling the world's mobile for cleaning. Long after the sun had drifted under the horizon, Shimmer found her way to the room in the manor of Trulinar. Needing to earn her keep if she wanted to have money for food later, she'd finished her work with Kitable and then worked the kitchens. She was exhausted, yet her mind continued to turn over the research. Mysteries were her favorite pastime, at least until they interfered with her sleep. She could hear her bed calling by her full name by the time she finally returned to her room. To her surprise, Prime Protector Karsh met her in the hallway, his tattooed chest bare and his wrists wrapped in dried grasses traditional to the Rydens of the Outlands. He was not her favorite person, although they had come to an understanding at some point. The Prime Protector's mission in life was to kill wizards whenever he was not occupied defending the king and queen, and his skill made Shimmer's skin prickle with sweat whenever someone mentioned his name. The multitude of knives he carried and his proficiency with them made her fear well-founded. He had not threatened her recently out of respect for Kitable, but that relationship was at risk of changing in a blink if Karsh ever believed Shimmer meant King Tohmas harm. Thankfully, another voice called her away from the Prime Protector. "Miss Weaver," King Tohmas greeted. A word?" King Tohmas and Queen Arnica advanced down the corridor, a large group of Protector at their backs keeping a respectful distance. The king dwarfed his petite wife, standing taller than any other man Shimmer knew. As far as Shimmer was concerned, he had one supernatural power. He could ask a question and make someone want to obey. Although he paused to let her reply, the answer was already decided. "Any time, my king," she replied, eyeing the Prime Protector who lounged against her door. She met his toothy grin with a smirk, and recognized the game. Rydens understood only one thing, strength. She could not show hesitation. Her greatest strength was her magic. She whispered a word to activate one of her hovering, ready but inactive spells. The new shield, designed to stop any physical contact from the front, appeared between them. It was not visible, but the Prime Protector was one of the few in the world who could detect magic without being a wizard, and he recognized the demonstration of power. Chuckling in satisfaction, he moved aside. She had to disarm 3 wards before she touched the handle to her room. Dumping her bag by the door by habit, Shimmer left the door open for her guests. She rummaged for cups, knowing etiquette demanded she serve drink as a hostess, but the Queen stopped her. "We appreciate it, Shimmer, but it's approaching midnight. We won't be long," Queen Arnica said softly. The little woman's voice had gained strength as the years went by, and she fell into her position as ruler of Espar. With her son nearing his 2nd birthday, the queen was again pregnant, although it was hard to tell on her tiny frame. She had given birth without difficulty, a contradiction to her build, much like her strength and her quiet demeanor. The couple left the Protectors in the hallway and wandered into Shimmer's mess. The king seemed instantly fascinated by her cluttered room. Even the bed hid under broken trinkets and half-finished items. There never seemed to be enough time left for tidying. Shimmer's mind was continuously occupied by the next project. "You're in late," King Tohmas said absently, watching one of her glass shard mobiles built to demonstrate light refractions with wonder. "I work evenings," she said. "Kitchen?" She nodded. "And with your father?" Queen Arnica prompted, making Shimmer bite her lip in reluctance. Match and Mixer, the moving show and apothecary shop, had a reputation she kept unconnected to her work with Master Kitable. Seeing her hesitation, the Queen frowned. "I would hate to think you'd given up your dancing." When the king glanced at his wife with one eyebrow raised, the Queen laughed. "Well, someone had to say it, and if you did, people might start terrible rumors. I, on the other hand, can compliment Shimmer on her dancing with complete impunity." "I still dance," Shimmer confessed. "I relocate to Weyburn." The casual mention of such a potent spell was wasted on the king and queen. They had no idea how complicated it was to cast the spell that accurately moved an entire person to a prescribed location. It had taken her a year under Kitable's tutelage to master it, but with Master Kitable as the only other caster they knew, it was no wonder they thought such advanced magic commonplace. "I go at least once a quarter cycle. I use a disguise and—" She trailed off, thinking that was a lie. She didn't wear a disguise at Match and Mixer. She wore one here. We did not come here to protect our reputations, Queen Arnicus consoled. The king nodded. I wanted to ask you about... The sentence fell off when he caught sight of a spinning orb, part of a trinket she was working on. Like an unfocused child, the man's eyes fixed on the orb with complete absorption. Into the subsequent silence, the queen finished, Kitable, Shimmer. We wanted to ask you about Wizavi Kitable. How is he? Shimmer hadn't heard anyone call him Wizavi for a while. It was a formal title of advisor to the king, but when they worked together, Kitable was master, the title he'd earned by being a wizard. A little baffled by the king's distraction, Shimmer answered without censoring her reply, grouchy as ever. She smiled apologetically at the queen's bemused expression. He is Master Kitable, my queen. He hates that ride and title, by the way. We'd noticed he was acting strange these last moon cycles, a little shorter in temper, the queen said. The use of the word we felt out of place. The king was not noticing much of anything. I guess I agree he's bristling more than usual, Shimmer answered. I've asked him about it, but he'll not talk about it, at least not to... If not to you, then to no one, Shimmer, Arnica insisted. Good to hear he's doing well, King Tohmas said, his smile surprisingly sincere. We should let this poor girl rest, my lady. Knowing her words had never implied well, Shimmer looked at the queen for an explanation. King Tohmas was known for having a good sense of humor, but she heard no jesting in his voice. What had they discussed earlier in the day? Can you give me a moment, my love? Arnica said. I think we might have some womanly things to discuss. Dismissed like a servant, the king complimented Shimmer on her room, wished her and her father well, and left. Shimmer waited until he had closed the door. Did I say? Not you, Shimmer. It's him. It gets worse when he's tired. It's been a long day. It? She asked. I look at him, and I do not see the man who conquered Espar, my queen. He seemed like a child. Like... Knowing finishing the thought would insult the king further, Shimmer let it drop. Releasing a long sigh, the queen nodded grimly and finished, like his mind cannot see what is in front of him? Yes, I am sorry to bring this to you. Kitable already knows, but I wanted to tell you as well. Tohmas is unwell. Her longing eyes went to the recently closed door. Every moon cycle he worsens. His ears hear one thing, but his mind another. As much as suggesting it would be blasphemy, I believe it is Soulburner's doing. Shimmer shook her head, knowing the reputation of the sword as a gift from the goddess Inak, Tohmas's patron goddess, but she stopped when she remembered the day he'd accepted the blade from a red-haired woman. The legend claimed the goddess Inak had presented the sword. Still, Shimmer had recognized all the fires as apothecary ploys, and the presenter as celebrant Lonely Fire Dancer, a whore and holy woman who'd been with the armies. No goddess had been involved. To reveal as much to the people of Espar would undermine Tohmas's claim to Espar, but it made it likely the queen was right to suspect the enchanted weapon. Although the sword's powers had been unexplained initially, they had found a source. Untouchable powers. These strange powers were known to dispel wizard magic, but beyond that, their origins and uses were a mystery. Occasionally, people, usually celebrants to the gods, could manifest the power, but no one knew how to teach the ability. That was for the best in Shimmer's opinion. She didn't want anyone using untouchable powers around her. Beyond merely being immune to magic, a touch from an untouchable would destroy her magic trinkets and hovering spells too. They were a thing of nightmares for wizards. The queen smiled weakly. He snuck away from me to give Kitable a mission, and while I agree with the mission, I needed you to know about the situation before you left. I wanted to ask if you might find something to help him. Kitable has already said it's a different kind of magic than yours, the untouchable kind. It affects Tohmas the most when he's tired, so maybe something could help him stay aware longer. Anything that will help him keep up appearances. We will try, Shimmer promised readily, knowing that her master would not object to such an oath. Tohmas had been Kitable's patron for years, and she had no doubt the wizard was fond of his king. The king's wife nodded in thanks. As she turned to go, she added, I believe he was right to assign Kitable the task, so I will let it remain. Please keep me apprised. Shimmer immediately bowed her head in obedience. The idea that the queen was dictating to her husband should have upset Shimmer, but if the king's weakening mental capacity became widely known, the consequences would be far worse. They needed the king to hold the unity he had forced upon the land. Without him, Espar would revert to bickering princedoms and ancient feuds. The new kingdom was too young to be left on its own. They needed their king. Her fatigue had left her entirely, and she doubted she could sleep with the new mystery to occupy her, a cursed sword. And how could they stop the sword if their magic was useless against it? Too agitated, she decided against sleep. The night felt darker than usual, and even the magic light of the Wizardstone Manor could not lift the feeling. Desperate for relief, she took a long walk outside the manor of Trulinar. Every time she left, she had to walk farther to leave the growing settlements and get beyond the cut trees. But once she was surrounded by old cedars and oaks, she cast her relocation spell. In a blink, she was at the Match and Mixer, which had set up a permanent place in Weyburn, far in Espar's south. Close enough to the southern borders, the apothecary shop attracted visitors from the outlands as well as the regulars from Galanth's capital, keeping her father's apothecary business brisk. When the lamps on the street corners were going out, Match and Mixer closed its sides and put out the benches for the shows. Her father had his minor castings and juggling, but the show truly filled to capacity when Shimmer joined. Under the light of torches, finally allowed to dress comfortably and wear her jewelry, Shimmer found what she had come for. She danced. Her heart settled with the movement, her mind clearing. Along with cheers, coins, shouts, and propositions, she drew a huge crowd. Here she was not a practicing wizard. She was a dancer and an apothecary, and she was home.
The first chapter has been read, but the story has only just begun. Join us again for more voices, more worlds, more Chapter 1.